In the southeastern corner of Utah's Uinta Basin, a jagged, sun-bleached formation of sandstone and shale simply as the Mesa rises dramatically above 512 acres of high desert scrubland. For generations, tribal traditions held this specific stretch of terrain in deep disregard, referencing a persistent, localized presence, an unseen force that seemed to operate from the shadow of the ridge and beneath the hard-packed rock. By the late 20th century, that localized regional lore had shifted from rural myth into a focal point of high-level military surveillance, privately funded defense investigations, and rigorous modern scientific research. Yet, despite decades of high-definition thermal imaging, aerial laser mapping, and continuous electromagnetic tracking, the absolute core of the ranch's mystery remained physically out of reach, entombed beneath thousands of tons of fractured, collapsed stone along the northern cliff face. According to field journals and historical records from former security officers employed during the National Discovery Science Institute, NIDSCI, era in the late 1990s, the northern rim of the mesa was once home to open void spaces, naturally occurring caverns or carved fissures that extended directly into the cliff. However, at some point prior to the modern research era, a massive geological event occurred. Thousands of tons of massive sandstone boulders collapsed simultaneously, completely burying and sealing the known openings along the base of the ridge. For years, researchers debated whether this massive rockfall was a routine environmental collapse caused by natural erosion or an intentional, engineered act designed to permanently block human access to what lay inside. The breakthrough began when advanced subsurface imaging technology was deployed directly along the talus field at the base of the ridge. Utilizing multi-frequency ground-penetrating radar, GPR, and precision airborne LiDAR terrain mapping, geophysicists identified an extreme physical anomaly, a wide, subterranean void running parallel to the ridge, situated roughly 30 to 60 feet beneath the surface rock slides. The radar signals did not reflect the chaotic, scattered density typical of fractured sandstone or loose clay. Instead, the return telemetry revealed a uniform horizontal cavity with structural perimeter boundaries that appeared strangely linear and artificially defined. Initial scientific attempts to drill vertically into this void met with immediate, unpredicted mechanical resistance. When industrial core drilling rigs drove tungsten carbide bits into the mesa, the machinery encountered an impenetrable barrier at a depth where standard sedimentary layer rock should have yielded effortlessly. Multiple commercial diamond-tipped bits were sheared, stripped, or scorched within minutes of contact. When the drill strings were brought back to the surface for inspection, the slurry spoils flushed out by high-pressure circulation fluid contained anomalous materials that immediately triggered alarm among the site researchers. Micro-thin metallic shavings and ceramic-like fragments that did not match any component of the drilling rig itself. Subsequent laboratory analysis of these recovered metallic fragments, conducted using scanning electron microscopy and energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, revealed a highly unusual composition. The samples were composed primarily of engineered alloys containing trace rare earth elements, including tellurium and europium, combined within highly purified nickel-iron matrices. These specific elements are almost never found naturally in such concentrated, refined ratios within standard desert sedimentary formations, pointing toward the presence of either manufactured technology or an artificially reinforced structure embedded deep inside the geological strata. Faced with the impossibility of drilling straight down through the obstruction, investigators altered their tactical approach. The objective shifted from vertical core drilling to a direct, horizontal excavation aimed at clearing the collapsed talus field at the base of the cliff wall to uncover the original subterranean passage. Using heavy earth-moving equipment under strict environmental and radiological safety protocols, excavation crews began meticulously removing the massive boulders one by one. As the heavy machinery cleared deeper into the slope, removing hundreds of tons of debris, environmental sensors surrounding the site began logging startling telemetry. Handheld radiation meters recorded localized spikes in background gamma radiation, fluctuating rapidly from baseline levels whenever the equipment approached the buried cavity threshold. Simultaneously, Radio frequency spectrum analyzers picked up persistent 1.6 gigahertz signal spikes originating from directly inside the hillside, a precise frequency long documented across decades of ranch logging during anomalous events. Then, after days of continuous digging, the excavator bucket struck a solid vertical rock barrier that differed completely from the surrounding weathered sandstone. Hidden behind a wall of crushed rock lay a dark structural opening. It was not a typical natural cavern. The passageway was roughly square, its ceiling and sidewalls composed of dark, heavily compressed rock that exhibited distinct, repeating impact patterns, unmistakable indicators of deliberate, physical excavation. The collapsed barrier blocking the tunnel had finally been breached. A cool, stagnant draft of air pushed outward from the newly unsealed dark shaft, carrying a dry metallic odor that immediately registered on the crew's environmental monitors. The subterranean passage leading into the heart of the Skinwalker Ranch Mesa was open for the first time in modern history. What lay waiting inside that darkness would challenge every existing assumption about the ranch, its history, and the true nature of the phenomena beneath the earth. The stagnant draft escaping from the newly unsealed passage registered an immediate 20-degree drop in temperature compared to the desert heat outside. As the environmental safety team stepped past the broken threshold with industrial-grade respirators and multi-gas meters, handheld air quality monitors confirmed that while oxygen levels were stable, the air carried a high concentration of microscopic oxidized metallic particulates. Illuminated only by high-intensity LED beams, the subterranean shaft extended horizontally directly into the deep structure of the mesa. The corridor was remarkably uniform, maintaining a clean geometry roughly 8 feet wide by 8 feet tall. Rather than the irregular, jagged rock faces characteristic of natural water-carved cave systems, the perimeter walls displayed smooth surfaces lined with distinct, linear tool marks etched into the compressed rock. The structural uniformity pointed toward a deliberate engineering effort, though whether it was excavated using modern industrial equipment or historical mining techniques remained immediately unclear. As the forward team advanced 40 feet into the darkness, handheld electronics began to fail. Digital cameras experienced sudden battery drain, dropping from full capacity to complete power loss in seconds. Simultaneously, portable RF spectrum analyzers recorded localized high-amplitude electromagnetic spikes centered precisely at 1.6 gigahertz. The signal was not a continuous frequency broadcast. It emitted in tight, rhythmic pulses, as if broadcasting from an active, powered source deeper inside the corridor. Roughly 70 feet into the ridge, the main passage opened into a wide, dome-shaped subterranean chamber. Here, the artificial nature of the site became indisputable. Embedded into the far wall of the chamber were massive, structurally integrated metallic beams forming a lattice framework against the surrounding rock. These support structures did not resemble standard timber or steel I-beams used in traditional mining operations. They were seamless, smooth, and lacked any visible welds, rivets, or mechanical fasteners. To document the chamber before advancing, the team deployed a specialized subterranean drone equipped with thermal imaging and solid-state LiDAR. As the drone hovered near the center of the dome, its thermal array captured a stark temperature contrast. While the surrounding rock wall maintained a uniform 52 degrees Fahrenheit, a distinct section of the metal-reinforced wall registered a localized cold anomaly dropping below 32 degrees, forming a sharp, rectangular thermal signature on the monitors. A physical inspection of this thermal anomaly revealed a heavily reinforced metal bulkhead, partially covered by fine silt and fallen sediment. The bulkhead was composed of the same non-corrosive alloy identified in the core drilling spoils during the Mesa excavation. No handles, keyways, or mechanical hinges were visible on its surface. However, surrounding the border of the sealed door were faint, engraved geometric symbols, concentric circles intersected by fine, parallel lines that did not match known military designations or mining signifiers. As an operator cleared away the clinging dust using a high-pressure air jet, a sudden wave of acoustic resonance echoed through the cavern. Handheld audio gear picked up a low-frequency hum measuring approximately 19 Hz, an infrasound frequency known to induce physical disorientation, acute nausea, and visual vibration in humans. At that exact moment, surface monitoring crews positioned above on the Mesa top radioed down to the Subterranean team with an urgent update. Surface-level magnetometers directly above the tunnel coordinates had just logged a massive sudden spike in magnetic field strength, jumping over 300 nanotesla's in less than 2 seconds. Simultaneously, wildlife monitoring cameras near the ridge captured an unusual atmospheric event. A faint, luminescent column of light briefly materializing in the clear sky directly above the mesa, aligning precisely with the underground chamber's GPS coordinates. Inside the cavern, the low-frequency acoustic hum gradually stabilized, but the sealed metal bulkhead remained firmly shut. The presence of engineered alloys, localized thermal drops, structural reinforcement, and synchronized surface phenomena confirmed that this was no abandoned mining shaft. The team stood before an artificially constructed, technologically active subterranean vault hidden deep inside Utah's most notorious geological anomaly, and proceeding further would require an entirely new level of scientific investigation. The sudden surge in surface electromagnetic activity forced the underground team to pause and establish a secure, shielded forward base camp inside the dome-shaped cavern. With updated safety protocols and secondary power generators running heavy cabling into the passage, researchers brought in mobile X-ray fluorescence, XRF analyzers, and portable seismic reflection units to study sealed bulkhead without resorting to destructive breaching methods. Initial XRF scans of the bulkhead's metallic surface produced data that baffled the material scientists on site. The alloy was predominantly composed of titanium and iron, but it contained an unnaturally high concentration of carbon nanotubes embedded directly within the metallic matrix, a manufacturing technique requiring vacuum-state precision and advanced synthesis. More strangely, isotopic analysis of the nickel content showed unnatural ratios that do not occur in terrestrial geology or standard industrial metallurgy. The atomic signatures closely mirrored those found in certain nickel-rich iron meteorites, yet the material was undeniably shaped, machined, and structurally integrated into the mesa's bedrock. While the metallurgical team conducted non-invasive surface scans, geophysicists operated a high-frequency seismic reflection array along the floor and perimeter walls of the dome. By sending controlled acoustic pulses through the rock, the system mapped the density of the terrain beyond the bulkhead. The resulting three-dimensional render revealed that the bulkhead was not merely a vault door. It served as the entry point to a descending structural corridor that extended an additional 300 feet deeper into the base of the mesa, terminating in a massive subterranean complex situated hundreds of feet beneath the surrounding desert floor. As data from the seismic scans streamed onto the monitors, a secondary anomaly caught the attention of the lead investigators. The acoustic return signals passing through the deep lower complex were returning distorted, showing localized pockets where sound waves sped up rather than slowed down, a physical impossibility unless the medium through which they traveled possessed varying gravitational or atmospheric densities. To investigate these deeper structural layers without risking human personnel, the expedition prepared a tethered microrover equipped with high-resolution optical cameras, gas sensors, radiation detectors, and a dual-frequency LiDAR unit. Looking closely at the base of the bulkhead, technicians discovered a small 6-inch clearance near the floor, partially filled with fine gravel. Using a pneumatic vacuum line, the crew cleared the obstruction, opening a narrow gap just wide enough to accommodate the crawler drone. With high-intensity LED beams cutting through the heavy silt, the rover crept past the bulkhead and down the sloping passageway beyond. The live video feed, relayed back to the cavern monitors, showed a striking change in architecture. The rough tool-marked rock gave way to smooth, dark walls composed of an unidentifiable vitrified material, rock that appeared to have been melted and instantly flash-cooled into a glass-like finish. The surface showed no seams, joint lines, or drill marks, resembling the interior of a continuous heat-molded conduit. As the rover descended deeper along the vitrified ramp, the environmental telemetry, displayed on the control screens, began to fluctuate wildly. The ambient temperature inside the lower tunnel did not rise as expected with depth. Instead, it dropped continuously, eventually stabilizing at a constant chilling 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Concurrently, The drone's internal magnetometer registered localized magnetic field gradients that fluctuated rapidly between 0 and over 2 test magnetic field strengths comparable to those generated inside medical MRI scanners. 200 feet down the vitrified slope, the rover's camera array picked up a sharp turn in the passage, opening into a vast underground chamber. The camera lit up a cavernous space whose ceiling stretched beyond the range of the drone's primary lights. Positioned in the center of this lower vault was a series of large, elevated stone pedestals, each topped with intricate metallic housing units that appeared to be aligned in a precise geometric pattern pointing toward magnetic north. Before the rover could move closer to inspect the central structures, its telemetry feed suddenly cut to static. The control system logged an instantaneous power surge within the drone's lithium-ion battery array, followed by a total signal collapse. On the monitors back in the cavern, the final frame captured by the rover before going dark showed a faint, self-luminous blue haze coalescing directly above the central pedestals, a glowing atmospheric phenomenon originating deep within the silent, unsealed depths of the Mesa. The sudden loss of the micro-rover's signal forced the research team to halt direct physical movement and evaluate the localized electrical surge. Rather than immediately deploying secondary equipment into the lower vault, the team initialized a broad-spectrum radio frequency sweep across the perimeter of the cavern. The goal was simple: determine whether the surge was a localized electrostatic discharging event caused by the vitrified tunnel walls or an active, powered transmission originating from the pedestals themselves. Within seconds, the monitoring array picked up a complex repeating wideband frequency sequence. The transmission was not restricted to the previously recorded 1.6 GHz range. It spanned a broad band of frequencies, spiking sequentially from 433 MHz up through the 3.4 GHz band. When audio engineers ran the captured signal through signal processing software, the visual waveform displayed clean, mathematical intervals, bursts of digital-like data separated by precise, microsecond pauses. The signal was structured, deliberate, and undeniably artificial. To cross-reference these subterranean readings with surface-level conditions, the underground lead contacted the ranch command center via fiber optic landline. The surface team confirmed that the moment the blue luminescence appeared on the rover's camera, environmental monitoring stations across the entire 512-acre property registered simultaneous, severe sensor anomalies. High-definition optical cameras pointed at the Mesa captured localized optical distortion, a subtle, lens-like warping of the horizon directly above the underground vault's calculated coordinates. Simultaneously, animal telemetry tags attached to livestock grazing on the pasture below indicated a sudden, synchronized spike in cattle heart rates, with the herd moving rapidly away from the base of the ridge. Determined to map the lower vault without risking additional motorized equipment, geophysicists deployed a passive cosmic ray muon tomography system. By placing highly sensitive scintillation detectors along the floor of the upper chamber, the team could measure the rate of subatomic particles passing down through the Mesa's rock layers. Because muons pass through solid rock at predictable rates but are absorbed or deflected differently by hollow spaces or high-density metals, the data gathered over several hours allowed the computer array to reconstruct a detailed, high-resolution, three-dimensional density map of the entire subterranean system. The resulting muon scan revealed an architecture far more extensive than previous ground-penetrating radar had suggested. The central lower chamber measured roughly 120 feet in diameter, with a domed ceiling supported by monolithic internal columns. Directly beneath the central pedestals, the scan identified a massive high-density metallic mass, a solid, symmetrical object measuring roughly 30 feet across, embedded deep within the floor strata. The structural density of this object far exceeded that of standard iron or steel, matching the extreme mass signature of super-dense, cold-worked alloys. Even more intriguing were the structural pathways branching off from the main lower vault. The muon density map outlined 3 distinct subterranean tunnels radiating outward from the central chamber like spokes on a wheel. One tunnel extended westward, passing beneath the perimeter fence line toward public land. A second pointed due south, terminating directly beneath the ranch's central pasture, an area historically associated with the highest concentration of unexplained ground anomalies, soil sterilization spots, and livestock incidents. The third shaft sloped sharply downward at a steep 35-degree angle, extending deeper into the basement rock of the Uinta Basin toward depths that the muon sensors could no longer accurately resolve. As the data rendered on the command monitors, a physical change occurred within the cavern. The ambient air temperature near the sealed bulkhead began to rise rapidly, climbing from 31 degrees back up to 65 degrees in less than 10 minutes. Simultaneously, the low-frequency 19 Hz acoustic hum that had previously caused physical discomfort among the crew vanished entirely, replaced by absolute, silent equilibrium. The localized magnetic field fluctuations collapsed back to baseline levels, and the repeating 1.6 GHz radio transmissions ceased as suddenly as they had begun. The sudden drop in electromagnetic activity presented the team with a narrow window of opportunity. The subterranean environment had stabilized, but the data collected thus far painted a clear and startling picture. The underground network beneath the mesa was not an isolated geological cave or an abandoned historical site. It was a vast, interconnected, and technologically responsive subterranean facility, physically tied to the very locations on the surface where high strangeness phenomena had been documented for decades. With the electromagnetic field stabilized and environmental levels returning to baseline, a secondary entry team equipped with fully shielded, hardwired atmospheric and optical gear descended into the vitrified lower corridor. Walking down the glassy slope, the investigators noted that the smooth, fused tunnel walls were remarkably free of dust or moisture, exhibiting a mirror-like finish that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. As they reached the base of the ramp and entered the vast central chamber mapped by the muon tomography scan, the physical scale of the subterranean facility became fully visible. The central vault was immense. High-power portable floodlights revealed 4 massive monolithic support pillars crafted from dark, fine-grained stone lined with metallic conduits that ran vertically from the chamber floor into the vaulted ceiling. In the center of the room stood the raised stone pedestals observed on the micro-rover's final transmission frame. Upon closer physical inspection, these pedestals were not decorative or religious structures. They functioned as mechanical housing platforms for complex, solid-state electronic or energy distribution nodes. Each pedestal was topped with a polished housing unit constructed from the same carbon nanotube reinforced alloy found on the upper bulkhead. Inside these open housings lay large, multifaceted crystalline structures mounted within non-magnetic stabilization rings. The crystals were dark, nearly opaque, but possessed a subtle internal iridescence when exposed to direct ultraviolet light. Material testing using handheld spectroscopic devices indicated that the crystalline structures were composed of synthetic, ultra-pure silicon carbide infused with heavy metallic isotopes, a material structure widely utilized in modern high-power semiconductors, quantum computing substrates, and directed energy research. Surrounding the central pedestals were physical artifacts that directly linked this underground facility to known military and scientific research efforts of the late 20th century. Resting near the perimeter of the central platform, investigators discovered several heavy industrial-grade transit cases bearing nondescript government contractor part numbers, alongside degraded rubberized cable harnesses and early-generation fiber optic lines. The presence of this equipment confirmed a critical historical reality. Prior to the modern private research eras, covert defense or government agencies had not only been aware of the subterranean network, but had actively accessed and attempted to interface with the subterranean infrastructure decades earlier. Archival markings stamped on the metal casings reference defense contractor logistics codes matching those used during the 1980s and early 1990s, a period when early government precursors were quietly monitoring anomalous electromagnetic emissions throughout the Uinta Basin. However, the condition of the left-behind gear painted a picture of a hasty, unannounced withdrawal. Several cable conduits leading from the human-installed monitoring units toward the central pedestals had been cleanly severed, and heavy lead shielding plates were found dropped in place near the base of the southern exit tunnel. To understand why previous covert investigators had abruptly abandoned their equipment, the team deployed high-resolution thermal and ultrasonic inspection tools along the three branching tunnels identified in the muon scan. The southern tunnel, which extended directly toward the ranch's central pasture, showed signs of intense, localized thermal stress. The vitrified floor near the tunnel entrance was deeply fractured, displaying heat-induced spalling where the rock had been subjected to extreme temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. As the team moved toward the mouth of the downward-sloping third shaft, the deep conduit extending toward the basement rock of the Uinta Basin, their radiation and magnetic sensors recorded a subtle, rhythmic change. The baseline radio frequency spectrum, which had been silent since the stabilization event, began to register faint, recurring ultra-low frequency ULF acoustic pulses traveling upward from deep below. Unlike the earlier 1.6 GHz radio emissions, these ULF waves operated at frequencies between 3 and 30 Hz, vibrational frequencies capable of traveling hundreds of miles through the Earth's crust without losing signal integrity. The presence of active, self-sustaining electronic nodes, historical defense contractor hardware, and deep-crust communications conduits revealed that the Mesa Subterranean complex was not a simple historical mine or natural cavern. It was a long-standing, multi-layered nexus point, an underground installation built around an active deep Earth technological system that had been studied, monitored, and ultimately sealed away from the surface world. The recovery of human hardware alongside anomalous subterranean architecture brings the decades-long enigma of Skinwalker Ranch into sharp, evidence-based focus. For years, public discussion surrounding the property fluctuated between local folklore and speculative accounts of high strangeness. However, the physical recovery of engineered alloys, vitrified conduits, carbon nanotube matrices, and active electromagnetic nodes beneath the mesa grounds the mystery in tangible, measurable science. The physical and electronic evidence establishes several concrete findings. First, the subterranean network beneath the ridge is an artificially constructed facility designed with deliberate structural geometry. The presence of uniform 8 by 8 foot passages, linear excavation marks, and seamless vitrified ramps confirms that high-energy engineering occurred deep within the sandstone strata. Second, the metallurgical profiles of the recovered materials, specifically the carbon nanotube-reinforced titanium alloys and unusual nickel isotopic ratios, demonstrate material synthesis comparable to advanced aerospace manufacturing and specialized defense research. Furthermore, the operational telemetry recorded during the unsealing process directly links underground activity with surface-level events. The synchronized 1.6 GHz radio frequency bursts, localized thermal drops, and rapid magnetic field shifts measuring over 300 nanoteslas mirror the exact sensor anomalies recorded across the ranch for decades. These synchronized readings suggest that unexplained optical distortions, radio interference, and livestock reactions observed on the surface are not isolated atmospheric events. Instead, they appear to be surface manifestations of an active subterranean electromagnetic system anchored deep within the geological framework of the Uinta Basin. The presence of abandoned defense contractor transit cases and severed fiber optic harnesses from the late 20th century confirms that covert governmental and scientific entities studied this underground infrastructure long before private research efforts began. The abrupt departure of those early researchers, evidenced by abandoned equipment and severe heat damage along the southern pasture conduit, points to an investigation that encountered forces exceeding their operational control. Despite these significant breakthroughs, fundamental questions remain unresolved. The exact origin, age, and ultimate purpose of the central pedestals and their synthetic silicon carbide crystalline nodes cannot be definitively determined from publicly available data. While the physical structures and electromagnetic emissions are verified, researchers have not established whether the facility was built as an advanced monitoring array, a deep Earth communications hub, or something entirely outside our current technological paradigm. Furthermore, the ultimate destination of the third shaft, stretching deep into the basement rock of the basin, remains unexplored due to extreme magnetic gradients and depth. As scientific teams analyze the physical samples, map the radiating structural pathways, and monitor the ultra-low frequency signals pulsing from the lower chambers, the unsealed tunnels of the Mesa stand as a profound physical reality. The investigation has moved beyond folklore, leaving behind a clear empirical record of an advanced subterranean system embedded beneath the desert floor. What lies deeper along those vitrified shafts may ultimately redefine our understanding of anomalous phenomena, defense history, and the forces operating beneath Skinwalker Ranch. The question that remains for science and history alike is not whether something exists beneath the mesa, but rather, who constructed this silent subterranean network, and what purpose does it continue to serve deep within the earth? If you enjoyed this documentary, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below.